the sun shines bright and the seeds are sown. Portugal, it's the place to be. Join the community, come and see. Expats Portugal.
How one expat lost 15,000 euros on a euro exchange, and more importantly, how you can avoid that happening. Thank you for being here tonight. We'll have a look at this eye-opening real case study, and others probably, showing how expats have lost thousands through bad timing, hidden charges, and unreliable providers. How to lock in stronger exchange rates before the market moves against you. Common traps that quietly drain money from large transfers. How to avoid them, of course. Practical planning tips for sending funds securely during property purchases, relocations, pension transfers, and major investments. And finally, but I'm sure there'll be other things that will come up this evening when we talk to Sarah Davey of Spartan FX, simple strategies that can help you protect your savings and prevent costly surprises. So welcome, Sarah. Thank you for being with us tonight.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Yes, it is a bit cooler, but it is colder in the UK. My family have snow, so I'm in a better position here in Portugal.
Well said. And I have been sent that meme. If it's our friends in Portugal saying it's sunny here in Portugal, tell them to off. That meme is already circulating. Although it's cold here in Portugal, it's still warmer than some of our native original countries. So thanks for being here, Sarah. And by cold in Cascais, we're talking what, 4 or 5 degrees probably, aren't we?
Well, I mean, the thing is, anything under 20 now, I've become acclimatized. Someone said to me, but you're from the UK, you've only been here 18 months, but I've acclimatized well.
20 is the new zero. We could say
Yeah.
that, can't we? 20 is the new
Anything
zero
below
when you're
20 is
acclimatized.
getting
Yes,
cold.
I'm feeling you. I understand exactly what you mean, having acclimatized myself here. So teach us then tonight, Sarah, how we can not get in that position where that expat who was doing an exchange was 15 grand the worse off in that particular situation. I guess we'll come to that particular case study. Maybe we should start with the most common mistakes generally expats are making when they're transferring the big sums of money internationally. Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight.
No, that's fine. I think generally it's underestimating timing. People always leave it to the last minute because they don't think about it. I appreciate that. There's so many things to think about when you're moving country, or even if you're here and you're thinking about buying property, it's really the last thing. It's more around, do I want this property, and in all the paperwork and dealing with all that sort of side of things. And then you're told, right, these are your payment dates. You need to pay a deposit. That's when you got your head in gear and think, right, I've got to make this payment. And that's where, it might cost you more because you've not thought about it sooner, or you're trying to make a payment and it needs to be there in 2 days' time. That might not be physically possible. There's still banking timings that you need to take into consideration. Even like the Portuguese banks, things like that, they can take time. There is compliance, certainly on larger sums of money. So yes, payments can be done very quickly, but there's still a lot of process around that to a certain degree. And that's where we find that clients can find it quite stressful that they've left it to the last minute and then they can't meet their deadline, or and as I said, the compliance side of things, obviously we'll go into detail. It's not just about the price, the process of moving money and larger sums. I mean, I think it was this week in the EU, they're kind of banning, I think, the money under 10,000 in cash. Obviously, I know that we're sort of phasing that out, but again, it's because they want more checks on the money, so to prevent money laundering. So of course, the more you're transferring, the more checks that they want to put in place.
And there's going to be more of that on the way, I think, isn't there, as you alluded to there. We'll come back to that then on timing, market fluctuations, not an easy word, market changes as well. We'll come back to that. But this particular eye-catching case study here of the expat who lost 15,000, what happened in that particular situation?
So the client was had sold a property in the US and was buying a property here in Portugal. So they needed really 250,000 euros to buy a property here, and then they sold a property in the US. So the money that they had and the rate, I think it was about the 8th of April, they were short by maybe just under 1,000 euros of what they could get with the amount that they'd sold their property for. Now, the rate, I can actually, let me share my screen, then we can let's have a look, see if I can share.
Yeah, any questions whilst Sarah's finding the screen share there? If you've got any questions about exchanging currency, please put them into the chat. I'll make sure they get to Sarah. And you will get a chance as an Expats Portugal premium member to hang out with Sarah after this main part of the call for YouTube. And of course, our premium lounge, that's tonight at 9 as well. Quite a number of topics we might be talking about this evening. We can see your chart there, Sarah.
Hang on, I got the right chart. There we go. Let's share that chart. That might be better. Okay, so we're talking about April time. So around sort of the beginning of April, it had been a little bit better, the rate. So the client thought, right, okay, maybe I'll wait a little bit longer. I've only probably got about, I think it was 2 weeks till completion. So I'm going to wait. They went away, I think, on holiday, or they were coming over to Portugal. And so they said they're gonna wait because they need a little bit more. And as I said, they'd seen it being a little bit better sort of a few days or a week earlier. Fortunately, in that 2 weeks, the rate did deteriorate. It moved about 6% in a very short space of time. So now the difference between what they could buy, they about 15,000 euros short, or $16,300. So what happened is that, yes, obviously you want to watch out for better rate of exchange, but actually they would have been better off just buying the money then. Yes, they were slightly short and they'd have to find that money, but now they have to find a lot more money. So again, we can give guidance on the rates, but we can never tell a client what to do. That is ultimately their decision.
Yes.
But I think it's around, yes, we want everyone to try and get a better rate exchange. Everyone wants the rates to improve. But it's around maybe budgeting and peace of mind. Again, it goes down to you and your situation. If that is your situation, you're selling a house and you're buying a house, and really you ideally want that to match, that's maybe your budget, and that's what you need to look at.
Yeah.
I always remember when I first met Jerry, he told me a story of a client who was from Canada, who had budgeted for a house and a car, and the rate had moved so much that either they couldn't afford the car or they couldn't afford the car that they wanted.
Yes.
So again, it may be a case of, yes, you might want the rate to improve, but right this second, the rate as it is, does that mean that you can afford what you need to buy? That's part of the question. I think you've got to have a bit of an understanding of what rate are you working on now as a budget. You know, when you're calculating your move to Portugal and you're calculating how much it's going to cost to pay lawyers' fees or to rent or to do this, what rate are you using? And then look at kind of what's my worst case scenario, so you kind of know what your ranges are that you need to be working within, so that
Yeah.
when it starts to dip down to that worst case scenario rate that you're working on, you might think, right, well, I might need to buy some euros now so that I'm within my budget, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, very good. These are themes we will return to throughout the call this evening. I want to go back to timing, if I may. You mentioned that as a big area of concern, or something to be very aware of anyway, the timing. What is the right time to get in touch with you in the process of thinking about exchanging your currency? And that's part of the whole timing piece, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that sometimes people might think, well, you know, I'm 6, 12 months, maybe longer away from actually moving. This might not be quite, you might not be thinking about now, thinking it's not affecting me now. But if you're looking to actually move to Portugal, then it is obviously going to affect you. I mean, we've got clients that are buying euros now for something, a deadline in like six months time. So people are planning their currency ahead of time, even 12 months in advance. So as I said, even if you're feeling like I'm not moving or I'm not doing something immediately now, but you're doing something in the next to 12 months, then it might be something you want to start thinking about. Also as well, which we can talk about later, but even in the beginning, not necessarily using us to make a transfer, it's just having a conversation around a couple of things. One, what processes are in place with my bank before I move to Portugal to make that move easier. That's the sort of research and things that you can do before you move. We'll talk about it, obviously. We'll go through the compliance side of things. So it's that kind of research that you might want to start thinking about. And I kind of compare us a little bit to a financial advisor, as far as you have your financial advisor, wealth manager, whatever you have, they help manage your money. You have a strategy in place for that. This really is no different, because I've seen clients pay small amounts to lawyers, we buy rent, Then you're looking at larger sums, whether you're buying a house, maybe you're thinking about doing a golden visa, or you're moving savings, then you've got your pension transfer, then you've got social security. There's lots of different things, and maybe it's not all in silo. Can we put them together? Can we working out a little bit of a strategy? Because this is a long-term thing, because we could fix rates up to 12 months, even 2 years, which is quite good for like any off-plan kind of property. But you're here for the rest of your life potentially, with however long that can be. And it's obviously it's very difficult. So it could be just something that's an ongoing management of trying to manage the rates and see what we can do.
Very good. Okay, thanks for the question, Ed and Sharon. We'll come back to that probably in our session with Sarah after the main recording, and that's a chance for all Expats Portugal Premium members to have a chat with Sarah, ask personal, more personal questions that you might not want on the YouTube recording, and that's a great feature of becoming an Expats Portugal member, which you can do at expatsportugal.com. Hidden costs. We mentioned that earlier on as a bit of a pitfall for people. Could you tell us more about some of these hidden costs people might like to look out for?
Sometimes we hear that the bank will say they'll do the transfer for free, and that's not what they mean. It means that there might not be a transfer fee, but the exchange rate, that's where the cost will be. The conversion between your US dollars, your pounds, your Canadian dollars into euros, that's where they will be making their charge. So when they say it's free, it may be the transfer's free, but the conversion won't be free, and that's where you'll see the difference. And with banks, I mean, 3-4%. I mean, I think one client I met, he'd previously used Bank of America, and he realized that they charged him 6%. So it is worthwhile, bearing in mind that the bank isn't always the cheaper option. They vary. I think probably out of all the banks, probably Charles Schwab is probably the cheapest, but we can still beat their rates. Transfer fees, if there are any, again, that depends on the bank. So, shop around in that instance. We had one client that said that their bank was charging them 60 euros to make a transfer internationally. It's very expensive. There are banks that do it a lot cheaper, so bear that in mind. Also, as well, you may consider, again, when I said about lumping money together, if you are doing a few different transfers, maybe put them together instead of doing a small amount every now and then. Again, it depends on your situation. Some people are living off their pension, like I got my salary, something that comes in every month, and then that I can only transfer every month. Whereas there may be scope that you can do something once a quarter or put more money together. So there's things like that. There's a way around that you can control any sort of bank transfer charges. I think really, aside from the rates, when I say about price, people are always thinking about as a product, what's the price of that? Like when you buy a shirt, it's cheap. Is it cheaper in this shop or that shop? That kind of thing. But the exchange rate isn't just like that. When I explain that example for that client, that's an exchange rate movement. That's regardless, completely separate to what price do I offer, what price do I offer, what price does the bank offer. This is an exchange rate movement. So often clients, they can save money on the day on the rate against a bank or provider, but then buying the right time for you, that's where clients can often save more money. And then there's the process side of things, which actually we do spend a lot of time speaking to clients, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's what becomes more stressful is a bank has a limit on how much they can do. There's some more paperwork that needs to be provided. The beneficiary bank's holding up the funds. There's a lot of factors that can often cause a delay in actually the payment getting there, which is often one of the things that really I think is probably just as important as the price.
So cost, absolutely. I think when we're using the word cost here, it's not just the cost of the euros and the cents. It's the overall cost, the impact, if you like, more broadly, as much as you might be paying in stress as you might be on the exchange rate as well. So all things to be aware of. And this is where Spartan, where you get the great testimonials. It's all in the service, isn't it? How you can speak to a broker, a dealer, and how you can create a personal relationship and get that service that you might not get elsewhere.
Yes, that's correct. And that's where it can save time and things like that as well, because We've had clients come to us that have been using an online provider. There's been some issues and they've tried to contact them. Then they have the whole, we'll get back to you in 5 working days, things like that. It can take time, or they haven't been able to get any word or contact from them. Money's been returned, their accounts have been frozen. It's things like that that is, well, a cost of your time, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, which is precious, especially when you get closer and closer to the move. Time seems very, very precious, doesn't it? As the clock is ticking down towards the actual
And
move.
also, if it's just going to your account, then that's fine. But if it's for a specific reason, so for example, you've got a deadline to buy a property, does that
Mm,
put it at risk if you don't get the money there in time?
yes.
There was a client once that was buying a car. He used his bank. He'd sent the money. I don't know exactly what he'd done, but it didn't arrive. 2 weeks later, the money returned back to his account in the US, hadn't been paid to the seller of the car, couldn't buy the car, had to rent a car, and then in the intermediate time because he needed a car, and then he used us, and we managed to get the money there and put it in the seller's account. So that was an extra cost for him. As I said, for some, obviously, that stress of a property potentially. What's the impact of not getting that money there on time?
Very good. Okay. Other compliance matters that we haven't touched on already, and this situation I think is going to get more and more challenging, isn't it? With compliance, I think the direction of travel is more rather than less in terms of rules and regulations. What else can you tell us around the area of compliance and how people get caught short with that, Sarah?
Yeah, so unfortunately, there is more fraud these days. We see it all the time. They're very good. Very good. Some of the emails I've seen is just phenomenal. Now, the challenge is obviously this can happen, and we've seen it where the people that are obviously defrauding or scamming, they'll change the IBAN. And so
Oh.
if you were, say, doing it yourself or, sending it, as long as the IBAN is valid, then it will go to that account. So we'd always recommend that you ring, which is what we do, ring the beneficiary and always check that those details are correct, because there could be human error, from a lawyer typing it in on the, I mean, it's a 26 character IBAN,
Mm.
and then again, as I said, more the emails being intercepted more than anything really. So we just double check that those are the details that you've been given are correct. Do small tests as well, because again, if you're sending larger sums of money, I mean, even now, even just to send to friends or people I've not paid to before, sometimes I'll just send, you can send €1. You'd rather lose €100 than 100,000 euros. So, just do the small test if you're sending, especially the larger sums. The other thing we've seen with the compliance side thing with the bank is sometimes the beneficiary bank will flag the payment, and they basically want more information about the money. It's all about money laundering regulations. So what would traditionally happen is the beneficiary bank, so say it was the bank in Portugal, would then speak to the recipient bank, the bank that had sent the money originally. Now, if that was your US bank, they would obviously communicate between the two of them. You can imagine that's quite a slow process. We had a client that came to us. They asked for our help, but it was difficult because they hadn't used us. They'd used an online provider who has an intermediary bank, JP Morgan. So the money goes to JP Morgan and then to the Portuguese account. The Portuguese bank account had flagged the money. They'd sent the message to JP Morgan. So obviously she didn't know where her money was. So she contacted the online provider, 5 working days, we'll get back to you.
What?
Obviously that message got back to the online company. They needed more information about compliance, so she then had to provide that, which obviously takes time. Then they send the message to JP Morgan, but it doesn't get passed on straight away. So then she had to contact them again, 5 working days. Eventually that message then gets sent to the Portuguese bank. So we're talking, we're talking weeks before that money
Yes.
is released. And this can happen. So that's why we do a lot of the compliance up front. And if the beneficiary bank asks us questions, we're ready with the information that's needed. But I'm not saying that it happens for every client, but I would say what should be happening is on larger sums of money, there are, of course, more checks. And what should happen as well is, they do spot checks on random people. So it doesn't matter what size amount you're doing, they should be doing spot checks on random customers. And also, if you're doing smaller amounts, but you do irregular over a period of time, they would just check that out, because again, money launderers will try and stay under the small limits, do small amounts regularly. So again, this is where there will be compliance checks eventually if you're not seeing them initially.
It's amazing,
So
isn't it? People act very differently when it's not their money, I suppose, don't they? It would appear in the instance you gave there. You have given us a sense then the sort of component parts of the move and timing and so on. But can you give us a bit of a timeline with respect to, you know, a big payment, what to do, perhaps a suggested timeline of the big amount, probably for the home, maybe a car after that, and how far out in advance, you know, we should be thinking. So could you give us a little bit of an example timeline of when to put all these pieces together?
well, sometimes people wait until they know they're doing something. So if you know you found a property and you're ready to buy something, obviously that's then when you would really start thinking about it, because you will have a need. You might not have a deadline just yet, and obviously completion can be 3 months, maybe longer. So you know you're working with so longer time frames there. That's when people might suddenly think, right, let's think about this now, because I'm definitely buying it. What are my choices? What are my options? What's the rate doing now? You know, in what we think might happen in the next few months. Some clients, we found that as soon as they know that they're moving to Portugal, are perhaps starting to move money, or thinking about moving money, because they want to live here, they want to move here. And what sometimes they're doing is buying maybe a quarter or half of what they need, and then that spreads the risk. So overall, even if the rate improves, you've got a good average there. Again, some people are thinking about just trying to get, because they're leaving America and want to live here, or they're leaving the UK or wherever they're leaving, and they just want to get their money out of the US or the UK. So there is an element of that as well. No one's got a crystal ball, obviously, but what we're looking at really for sort of probably next year is really looking at obviously the inflation data, and what the banks, the Fed, the ECB are going to do with interest rates. We've had a small interest rate cut, but with the Fed, they're concerned about inflation. I mean, now the government's reopened, but we haven't had a lot of data for a while, so we might see a bit of volatility in the short term as more of this data is coming out. The concern really, I think, a little bit for next year is how the tariffs are then going to impact the economy in the US, because, you know, eventually when things are more expensive, businesses take that on, but then eventually they have to pass that on to the consumer. Will they be buying less? Will that mean that the companies sell less? Will they lay off workers? What does that look like? So, you know, by putting tariffs on, it is going to cost more, and who pays the price and what that looks like in sort of next year, how that plays out. So these are the sort of things that we're looking at and obviously paying attention to. And some, you know, a lot of clients do think that it could get worse. So in that aspect, the rates might seem worse now, but they could be worse next year. So then you'd be looking
Yeah.
at these rates thinking, oh, well, they were quite good.
Yeah, there are the theoretical considerations, aren't there? But there are some actual and real concerns for people now
Yeah.
in the
Let
shape
me,
that you're talking about.
let me share the 5 year. The other thing as well is what's important to kind of look at this rates, not in just, you know, a week, a month, is to sort of look a little bit historically, because yes, we have been better, but we are still better than we were sort of 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So again, you know, there's you know, if you depend what you're looking at, us as markets, as dealers, we're looking at this sort of longer term, and actually it's still, the rates are still good to how they were historically years ago, as I said, even the last sort of 5. But yes, we have seen better prices. So it's still, you know, still good rates in the grand scheme of things. Again, it's sort of looking at that sort of side of things. And the challenge obviously we have is that, you know, we don't know what will happen if there's any reversals of the war, like with Ukraine and Russia. Also, well, the UK, we've got the budget out next week, so we're obviously looking closely at that. But then the other thing to bear in mind, and what clients sometimes are doing, is that if there's small spikes in the rate, so maybe by 1%, 2%, but certainly 1%, that's when clients are thinking about buying some euros, and then watching out for those sort of spikes where the rate's slightly improved. let's buy some euros and sort of do it a little bit like that. But it's just giving yourself a little bit more options, because what we can do is you can buy currency as and when you need it. So again, if you've got a payment to make, say next week, you just make it as and when you need it. What we can do is, as I said, I'm telling you that clients are buying maybe a half or a quarter of what they need. They might not have a Portuguese bank account open. So you don't necessarily have to have a Portuguese bank account to buy euros. We can hold them on account free of charge. All the money's protected. So if anything should happen to us as a company, all your money will be returned. So even if you had, say, €1 million on account, all that money would be protected. But it is a way of buying those euros. If you're maybe buying property, you know that you're doing something, or even pension transfers, for up to 12 months, we can lock a rate today. And what that means is we can lock a rate.
Yes. Well, this is what that was going to be my next question to you. How do we lock in these better rates?
So what we can do is, with that, is say you were buying a property and you were completing in, say, 3 months' time. Today, you could lock the rate of exchange. We would need 10% of the amount that you need to lock. It's not a cost or a charge. It's because we buy all the money up front. So we're buying the euros. It's a small deposit so that you're securing that rate. And then when you need the money, whether that be in 3 months' time, 12 months' time, or your pension, something that you want every month, then we will pay the money out appropriately. So if it's a property purchase, when you pay the 90%, we'll pay all that money out. With the pension transfer, how that works is you pay 1 month deposit, and it will be the last month. So each month you just pay in your pension, and it keeps going out. And then the last month, you've either got the choice of starting the contract again, or we'll just pay out that the deposit that you gave on the 12th month. But it's a way of controlling the cost, because when you're buying a property, yes, I mean, there's other costs around, maybe a lawyer, survey, things like that that you've got those extra costs. But ultimately, when you buy in your home country and someone says to you, when you say, how much is this property going to cost, they don't turn around and say, well, 3 months' time, it could cost you more money, or it could be cheaper. Nobody knows. And that's the reality. So it's a way of controlling the costs so that you know how much it's going to cost you. If the rate in that time that you've got the money locked in for improves, you are locked into that rate. But again, it's more of a budgeting tool and peace of mind.
Peace of mind, yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the competition, and we'll come back to the distinctions, because sometimes I think with all the jargon, as it were, locking better rates, forward contracting, these sorts of things, we'll make sure we've got the distinctions right on those. But before we come back to that, how do you differ from banks and other currency exchanges in terms of your costs and the transparency of the service? So actually, before you answer that, let me just share with you a really nice unsolicited testimonial here that's come up in the chat. We saved £8,000 by talking through everything for transferring funds for our house with Sarah. I don't know if you know this. And the team, a little luck as well, of course, and we use them all the time as we earn in sterling, which is a little bit painful at the moment, adds Andrew there. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting week as well, isn't it, with the budget coming up next week. So there you go, £8,000 saved there. That's worth being here. And love hearts on the screen. The way to an expat's heart is through their exchange rate. It would appear on this call tonight. So yes, competitors. Let's go to those comparisons now.
Okay, so with the bank, as I said, there is a difference in the exchange rates. Normally about a 3 to 4% difference between us and the bank. As I said, we have seen some clients say that Bank of America is about 6%. Also depends what kind of account you have. Some people have premier accounts, but again, they're still not offering as competitive rates as they should be. The other side is around the exchange rate is unknown really when you make the transfer. So say, for example, you want a specific amount of euros that you're paying, say it was to a seller. You'd go into your bank and go, well, I want X amount of euros and that costs X amount of US dollars. Great, I'd like to do that. They're not going to process it straight away. So say the money goes later that day, or you've missed the bank cutoff time and it gets sent the next day. If there's any rate movement, then that's out of your control. That's when they will convert, when they actually send the money. So what will happen is that what can happen is if the rate moves either way, you're either going to get more money into the seller's account. I mean, again, depends on the size of the rate movement, but it could be short. That's the other thing, because if it's short, then you're going to have to send more money. So again, that's time and hassle and maybe a cost. So when we book a rate, it's secured. That's how much it's costing you, and that's the amount of euros that we put into the beneficiary account. Also, beneficiaries often do sometimes charge a receiving fee, but the way that we send the payments means that we take that charge on so that you don't receive that as well. So the money isn't short from that perspective.
Transparency. Yeah.
So there's transparency there. And that can be, I don't know, it can be small amounts, it can be a small percentage of the amount that you're transferring. It varies from bank to bank. The other side really is just the personal service. You know, they can't hold euros for you unless you've got a euro bank account with your bank, which not many people have. And sometimes that's often a cost to have if you are setting that up. So if you haven't got a Portuguese bank account, then you can't be thinking about buying euros in advance with your bank because you've got nowhere to put that money. So it just gives you a bit more options, and they wouldn't be able to do the forward contracts. They might offer it for businesses, but not for individuals.
Yeah. So the personal service that you're not going to get with some of the other mainly online services is what really distinguishes you. And when it comes to moving big amounts of money, that's where it's really kind of comforting, I think, to be able to speak to somebody.
I think as well, also, I mean, I spent a year abroad in America, in North Carolina, and I understand sort of the banking system there. And it, it depends obviously on the region where you are, but a lot of the bank tellers have never made an international payment before. So they struggle a little bit with that as well. So if they're asking you questions, you don't really necessarily know how to answer them either. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. Often we've had calls. In fact, someone called me the other week. I think it was like 9 o'clock at night, and they're in their bank in the US. Can you help me, Sarah?
9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, because they were in their
Wow.
bank in the US. My bank, it doesn't know how to do this, and that's the reality.
Wow. Okay. And you were able to help them with that, presumably. Okay, great. I want to go to these distinctions. Sorry to sort of labor the point, but just so that people can understand. I've heard this, once or twice before, and I still, it's still helpful to pull this apart and really understand what's going on. Locking in better rates for the future and forward contracting, not necessarily the same thing.
Locking in a rate and forward contracting, yes, the same. We call it a forward contract. That's the
Right.
technical term in our
Yes.
world as a forward contract. But
Yeah.
essentially, what it is you're locking or securing a rate for a future payment. That's what
Right.
essentially it is.
And that
Yes.
would be called a forward contract.
And that would be called a forward contract. The
Another
other
way of
option
referring.
is targeting a rate of exchange. So what you can do is you can say, I'd like to achieve X amount of rate. And we can put well, there's two things. One, you can watch out for that rate. So we'll monitor the market, and if it hits that rate, we'll notify you and ask if you want to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can set an order in the market so that when it hits that rate, it automatically buys for you.
Okay.
And we can do both sides of the market. So we can do it where we're watching out for a better rate of exchange, or we're watching out for a worse rate of exchange. And you'd be like, well, why would I do that? I'd want a better rate. But it's more a case of if in your time frame the rates are really starting to deteriorate, then you might think, well, actually, I might need to be buying my euros before it gets worse. So we
Okay.
really look at sort of both sides. And also we'd have the conversation as well as to, I would, I'd like 120 for my sterling euro, for my euros, but it's maybe not realistic right
Yeah.
now. So again, it's about also having realistic expectations potentially within your time. I mean, as I said, no one's got a crystal ball and anything can happen overnight, but it's still having a little bit of maybe realistic in your time frames as well.
But you can have those conversations and then leave it to Spartan to uh, um enact that rate alert, if you like, or that instruction. That's
Yeah.
left to your dealer to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's also a way so that you're not sort of, I mean, yes, we're monitoring the market for you. That's our job. But also you're not having to sort of like just sit there and watch every day.
You've probably got other things to do. Yes, especially if you're moving home. Okay, that's great. So you can outsource that mechanism to Spartan as well. Okay, that's great. A few quick fire questions then before we go to some of the questions here and then have our premium member session with you. Your number one tip for somebody making their first international transfer. This is probably around security and safety, isn't it?
Number one tip really is give yourself more time. I mean, at
Okay.
the end of the day, if I've got a deadline, would I give myself 2 weeks? Maybe. I know that sounds like we can do it quicker, but
Hmm.
I'd always be thinking about giving yourself a little bit more time
Yeah.
because, the banking system in Portugal, it is slower. There could be any number of issues you could encounter with your bank that you hadn't thought about. Again, obviously, we have those conversations and we like to try and investigate, like, who do you bank with? Is there a case of, the bank that you bank with, maybe it's not the best at doing that. Some brokerage accounts don't do international payments, so you have to move the money from there to your checking account. So that takes time. I had a client like that the other week, was buying a property. They were ready to transfer money to us and they realized that they couldn't send money. It would only send it to their US account. So they had to move the money and that took maybe a week. Then so again, it's things like that that sort of is obviously out of our control. We can't change that. You wouldn't know that until you ask those questions or you come to do it. So again,
Yes.
it's really understanding where is your money and what does that look like. Because I think with that client, I think it was just, maybe it was at Fidelity, and they had to open a different Fidelity account in order to move the money into that account to then move the money out. So again, that's where it took a week, a little bit longer. So it's things like this that it's understanding where your money is and what that looks like. So as I said, I would always give yourself, even if you're not thinking about, even if you don't buy in advance and we don't do the strategies and it's just a case of I need to make a payment now, it's bearing these sort of things in mind that people don't think about.
Very good. Okay. Number one tip for dealing with a phrase I think we came up with on these calls, volatility. So people are scared, aren't they? And understandably so, of a big and sudden change. What's the best way to mitigate? Your top tip for mitigating against that?
Um, I suppose it's be ready. I mean, it's completely free to have a conversation with us. It's completely free to open an account, and there's still no obligation to use us. But at least it puts you in a position, because I've seen it around a lot in the past over the years around sort of elections, things like that, that people have sort of thought about it. We said there could be volatility, and then all of a sudden it happens. The markets move quite dramatically. People want to take advantage of the rate, or it's getting worse and they're not in a position to do so. They haven't got an account with us, or they don't have a Portuguese bank account, so they can't move the money and things like that. So it's about being prepared, that you have everything in place so that if you do want to buy euros, you've got options.
Very good. And finally, then, before we go to some of the questions and points from our audience here this evening, if you're interviewing a currency company, and this would apply to Spartan as well, what's the first question you should ask them?
First question, if you were interviewing, what's the first question?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think.
I've suddenly turned it into a job interview, and suddenly
No,
you've
no,
got very
no.
nervous. It's like, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
I
And
know.
what's the
That's a
first
very good
question?
question. In Portugal, that's where I see myself.
Yes, yeah, good answer.
Well, I think that one, there's a couple of things. One, I think it's important to build a relationship with the person that you're working with. So that's important, to get to know them and to get to feel that you trust them.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a personal thing, but we do see reviews where people say that they feel like they've made friends, or we're part of the Spartan FX family, which is lovely. So I think that's important, the trust, because as I said, I do compare us slightly to your financial advisor, and
Hmm.
you have that kind of relationship with them. Yes, for some people they treat it slightly more transactional, but this is, I see it as, yes, we're dealing with money as a transaction, but it's for your move to Portugal, it's buying your dream home, it's all that sort of stuff. So I think that's important for us as a company to have that kind of understanding of what clients are going through. I think also it's around and regulations. So like we have the FCA in the UK, we've got the money transmitter license with FinCEN in different states in America. Are they regulated in the right places that you live, that you're transferring money to? Also, how are their accounts set up? Is the money protected? So as I said, we hold money. All of your money is protected, so we can provide information around that. So that's important because obviously we have your money. Those are the sort of questions I'd be looking at. And then I think there is a personal preference. Yes, there are other online providers out there. Some people prefer just to do it themselves. Yes, we don't have a card. So for some people, that's the right solution for them. But we find with the customers that we have, they value the service. We're sort of, competitive rate plus a human that you can speak to. And that's, I think, where, people value that service. Yes, you have to talk on recorded telephone lines when you are booking a transaction because you're entering into a contract. But we can do a Zoom call or a call like that so that you can meet your dealer and get to know them and things like that. So I think that's important.
Yeah. It's all about for people who still like to deal with humans, whilst we still can in this increasingly AI dominated world. Spartan is probably the company for you.
And I think experience. So I've been doing it for 20 years next year, and a lot of the dealers have been doing this 15 or 20 years. They have a lot of experience as well, and that's kind of where I go back to the guidance, and they've helped a lot of customers over the years. So they have a good understanding of the banking in other countries and the processes and things like that. And I think that that's quite helpful.
That's longer than some of the card-based companies have been in business, isn't it?
Yes.
And you make them sound like the Rolling Stones of the FX world, the combined age of about 300 or something. Don't tell them I said that, but yeah, I mean, let's just go with they've got a lot of experience. And a question about is this information general enough for France or French purchases? The euros, aren't they? People, just because we've heard this on the Expats Portugal call, doesn't mean you have to spend the euros in Portugal.
No, absolutely. I mean, obviously we talk about Portugal because that's the theme, but really a lot of our clients are buying in France, Spain, Italy, Switzerland, all over the world that we help clients move money in different currency pairings. So yes, if you were moving money to France, it's exactly the same because it's euros as well. So
spend your euros wherever you want to.
And I know I've touched on more kind of the graphs where obviously you're selling US dollars and buying euros, but we help with pounds from the UK, Canadian dollars, Swiss francs, Australian dollars. We deal with clients in the Middle East. So there's not a problem there.
There you go. Sarah, thank you very much. Anything else you want to add? Because I'm gonna conclude the call there for YouTube, and we'll get some more questions of a more personal nature.
As well is just quickly about sort of this is not my area, but it's something that people do. I hear asking, and it's sort of working a bit of hand in hand with that, which we've seen over a couple of years. Is people are sort of wondering about buying houses and things like that, and then obviously the cost of exchange. And it's worth sort of looking at how are the house prices increasing, because where we'd seen sort of, I think that a couple of years ago, house prices were going up, but fortunately the exchange rate had improved, so actually kind of negated that increase from a cost perspective. Now you'll probably know a bit more about that, Carl. I don't know how much at the moment house prices are going up. Obviously the exchange rate has been deteriorating, so all in all it is getting more expensive. As I said, it's not my area, and I'm not advising you to buy, but it's a consideration that actually with those two together, maybe it's worth thinking about buying. And that's another thing to sort of think about, the exchange rate in conjunction with things like that.
Oh, those factors, yes. Okay. A note to end on here, a good one, underlining the personal service. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for the information, says Valerie. We've messaged Ben. This is that first name terms already with the people at Spartan FX, the guys at Spartan FX, following the sale of the house in London, and we'll be talking to him shortly before we travel back to Portugal. So yes, that's how you roll, isn't it? Those great personal relationships and that peace of mind that comes from having a named contact.
And also, I did touch on a bit. I know we talked a lot about the larger movement makes such a bigger difference. But obviously we are seeing it a little bit with the smaller transfers. I'm feeling it myself as well with salary. So what you can do is fix the rate for a 12-month period with pension transfers and things like that, because while we see it, it's not a case of, it depends on how much you're doing, but a few thousand or say $3,000 a month, we don't take it as that. We take it as the full 12-month amount.
Yep.
And as I said, we just need the 1 month deposit. So again, it depends on your situation, but that's a way of kind of controlling the cost over maybe a 12-month period. Unfortunately, we can't fix it for longer than that, but it might give a little bit of security with how much you're getting each month. So there's things like that we can look at as well.
Great. The link is in the chat for opening an account, which is free, of course, to open an account and have a conversation with Spartan FX. And there is a moving your money guide available as well. So visit expatsportugal.com for that. And thanks again, Sarah. Thanks for all your comments and questions, everybody, in our Zoom audience as well. Thanks, Sarah, for the time being. Let's hang out now with the Expats Portugal Premium members.
Looking for a place to call your own, where the sun shines bright and the seeds are sown. Portugal, it's the place to be. Join the community, come and see.